Hi, everybody. My name is Heather Fromack, and I am the program manager for HSLDA's Educational Consultants. And here in Virginia, I think we decided we're on week 5 of quarantine. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I would love to hear where all of you are watching from. I'd love to hear what week you're on for quarantine. I'd love to hear how you're doing. And I know our guest today is going to be really encouraging and helpful with a lot of practical tips. Because I don't know about you, but in our home, we're kind of, the novelty of being home all the time is starting to wear off. Some of the soberness of all the uncertainty is starting to set in. And today we have a guest who can really help speak to how we can help our kids through a time like this. So I'm really happy today to introduce you, if you don't already know, to Candace Duggar, who is the founder of Bullied, Broken, and Redeemed, which is an amazing organization with such an important role. So what they do at Bullied, Broken, and Redeemed is they educate and train leaders, parents, and youth about the epidemic of bullying. But one of the especially great things about what they do is they also work to help bring healing in those circumstances. So Candace is a friend too, and I'm so glad you're here today.
Oh, Heather.
Tell us a little bit about how you...
excited to be here.
I'm sorry for the delay, friend. I would just do our best with this technology. I am so interested in having other people hear your story, how you got into this role and this organization started. So would you tell us?
Yes. Well, first, thank you, Heather. It's an honor to be here with you today, and I just adore all the work that you guys do at HSLDA. And I will share a little bit of our story of how we got there and why it is so important that we continue to support great organizations like HSLDA. Our family, about 4 years ago now, we've had our children in public school and in private school. And 4 years ago, I knew something was seriously wrong with my son at school. I had a child who went from happy and well-adjusted and just joy for life to angry and frustrated. I knew something was seriously wrong. And it was during that time that I started to pray, just how could I help my son? I knew we were losing him. I knew he was starting to dabble in dangerous activity. I knew the friends were changing. I just knew things were really bad. And when I approached the school and was assured that they were taking care of it, we knew there were some issues of bullying, but we didn't know how serious they were. We were met with, we've got it all under control, things are being handled. But during that time, God placed homeschooling on our heart. And God made it it felt very clear to me as a mom not to change schools, not to go to private school, but to homeschool our child. And we had to do that immediately or we were going to lose him. And at the time, I didn't realize how serious it was. But I did. I said, you know what, we'll pull him out for a while. I feel like so many other parents will pull it out and try homeschooling. If it doesn't work, we'll put him back in. Like that was my mindset because I never knew anyone who homeschooled except for a couple of people at church. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt completely ill-equipped. I had a child with lots of learning glitches, no idea, but I knew he was broken and hurting, just really hurting. It wasn't until my son was home with me for about 7 months that we learned the extent of the horrific bullying and the abuse that he had endured to the point he had attempted suicide 3 times. We didn't know about just the activities, the things that went on with him daily were horrific. It really is. And when I look at how could that have possibly happened during that time, you know, I'm home, we're home, my husband and I, our whole family felt we were involved. We were trying to do the right things. We were doing what the school told us to do. And yet still, even at that, the abuse was not only happening, but when we approached the school, retaliation bullying happened, and it really ramped up to push him into a mindset of isolation and control, and that if you don't stop talking, we will kill you or your family or hurt you. It's very, very damaging to a 12-year-old. So that's really how we kind of started our work here at Bullied Broken. And when we started talking about it in the homeschool community, you know, I was out there, I'm looking online, I'm researching everywhere. no one was really talking about it in our homeschool community, except for I noticed on many of my state threads and many groups out there, parents were saying, I'm going to homeschool due to severe bullying, but they weren't really talking about it in context of help, right? So that's kind of how our organization happened. That's how we kind of got started here at Bullied Broken. And now we help people all over the country. We help train leaders and parents and children, really on the epidemic of bullying that so many parents can't relate to. But on top of that, and one of the reasons we're here today is to help parents understand when a child comes home during that transition, there's a lot that a family can do to help put support around a child in crisis, whether they're coming home for a serious illness or anxiety or school phobia or during COVID-19 or due to bullying. It's all the same. It's not the exact same trauma, but it's the same approach that we can take to help put some additional support around our children to kind of help everybody's life run a little bit easier. And this is a method we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of families and teach all over the country. And I'm kind of excited to come here and talk with you guys about it today. So that's a little bit about what we do at Bullied Broken.
There's so many different directions we could go just with that. But
that's right.
Yeah, I think one of the phenomena that everyone is experiencing is this whole issue of having your children at home, being responsible for their education, and having sort of a window into what their schooling at school may have looked like, and trying to create an infrastructure where parents who aren't necessarily used to being responsible for that are feeling comfortable to step in, knowing what to do. So you at Bullied, Broken, and Redeemed have 3 steps that you recommend anybody coming home do. So start with, I know the first step you say is safety. So help us understand that.
It is. So our approach when families are coming into homeschooling for any reason that is maybe different than we as a family just can't wait to start homeschooling and it's going to be wonderful from kindergarten up. When we bring children home, we recommend things called the 3 S's, and it's safety and structure and support. Those are 3 things that we can do with intentionality to help our child. And the first thing is safety. As you can imagine, many of the kids I work with that are leaving public school or private school to come home due to bullying do not feel safe. And rightfully so. Just like right now, families are bringing children home from COVID-19 and the children are fearful. They're wondering about the virus. They're worried about their grandparents. They're worried about a parent or a sibling who's an essential worker. There's a lot of nervousness and anxiety. And one thing we can do to help our children during this time is to actually talk to them about safety. What does safety look like? And what can we do? We cannot control all things. It's like when we get in a car, we put on our seatbelt and we make sure our car is inspected and has the gas and things are running well. But even when within that, we all know there's an inherited risk. We don't talk about it every time we get in the car, but we take all the safety measures. And so with our children, we can talk about what we are doing as a family for safety. And that has to come from all different ages. Littles are obviously, guys, let's use common sense. Our littles don't need but so much information, but washing our hands and being safe. We don't want to create anxiety. We don't want to keep the news on running with words that are just processing into these little minds all the time. We want to talk about safety in a way that is something they can do of action, right? If you're a family who is taking off your shoes before you come home and when groceries come home, you're wiping them down, talk to them about what we are doing and why we're doing it, and this keeps our family safe, right? That's also the same conversation of why we are not going to have play dates with friends right now. It's really hard, but this is a safety issue for our family. We are not going to co-op and we're not going to these places. And when mom and dad go to the grocery store, you're not coming alone, coming with us. We go alone because that's a safety protocol our family has put in place. And every family has a different safety protocol. But talk to your children actively about what it is. Keep them informed. They're bright. They're smart kids. They're over there thinking. Give them actual information to think about. So I think that's one thing we need to make sure we're talking about. Safety. what does it look like? What can you do? How are you as a family keeping them safe? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's
I think
really
that's helpful that you even just mentioned some very specific steps, because I think as parents are feeling overwhelmed too. Sometimes you can feel such overwhelm in yourself, you're not exactly sure how to break it down into
Mhm.
smaller bits to explain to your children. So,
Mhm.
talking very practically about what kind of actions we're going to take to be safe in this time. But you also talk a lot about what safety looks like as it relates to educating your children at home, especially if your kids are
Oh
connected
boy.
to the public school system and you have some ties there, responsibilities there. Can you help unpack some of that for
Yes,
parents
I
too?
can. I actually did a very tough talk this morning on the uptick of sex trafficking during COVID-19. And we wouldn't think that's something happening. But in our homes right now, even in your house, people are after your children. Our kids are spending huge amounts of time online. They're spending a lot of time on games, way more than they were even in the summertime, because in the summertime we have structure and we're out and maybe we're at the pool. They're spending way more time even on here as our teenagers, right? The uptick in what's going online. And during that time, there are people after your children, even in your home, using webcams and other ways to gain control to them. So it's important that you're talking about these safety measures for each child of every age, talking about what's appropriate with youngers and safety protocol that we put in place even as parents of even online safety, right? What type of software do we use to keep our children online? Why mom and dad have passwords to your phone, even if you're 17? Because guess what? Mom and dad have passwords to each other's phones because we're adults and we have, that's a trust factor between moms and dads. We talk about those things in our family and the importance of anytime our children are spending time online, we need to realize there's an inherited risk. And even now, if you guys have read so much about even within Zooms or other online platforms or message boards that are happening, there is a lot of people that are they've got a lot of time right now. They're after our kids. We need to pay attention to what's going on. And we also really need to pay attention to the rise of cyberbullying, something I deal with a lot in our world. Just because your children are not in a physical classroom does not mean that it is not an uptick and still happening. And that's where we just really want to spend a lot of time kind of talking to our kids about how they're feeling, what's going on. Are you seeing a rise up and down of emotions? All of those things file into the safety of our children, right? We want to keep them safe physically, mentally, emotionally. All of these things are an important aspect of safety that parents need to kind of, unfortunately, sadly, right, Heather, that we have to be talking about these things. And so many parents aren't prepared because they're not conversations our parents had with us.
Yes, they aren't conversations our parents necessarily needed to have with us. And as we speak to our Facebook Live audience, please ask any questions you may have for Candace. This is a great time to have access to her and her expertise. But even as you're talking about how to speak to our children about safety, in me as a parent, I struggle with, well, I don't want to introduce scary thoughts to them that they haven't encountered or they don't need to talk about. But at the same time, I want to warn them. I want to give them practical wisdom and advice. Do you have resources that you can point to that literally walk
Yes.
people through? Talk about this, use these words.
I do. I actually, hold on. I think I have some next to me. I can, so it depends on which part we're talking about. If we're talking about internet safety, I know our group this week is going to be putting out a flyer that we recommend you keep by the computer or by your place, that every family member knows with this uptick and uprise what we are doing within safety online. And I'll be glad to share that resource with you, Heather, for your whole group. But it's things that are hitting each of those points for online safety. And I look at it like this. The conversations our parents did have with us might have been the stranger danger conversations. It didn't mean that it was putting the thought in our mind, but it was protecting us with passcodes or words or things that we needed to know about. Our parents would have talked to us about inappropriate touch. Same conversations need to happen now for safety, but they have to now be included to, we would never take pictures of anything of that nature and share it.
Mm-hmm.
Because people will want that information, and then many times sending your kid money for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll send them an Amazon gift card or send them things in a gaming system. If you do this, I'll give you that. And that's how it starts to slowly seep into your house, even when you're there, even when we're sitting here. You know, there's webcams and cameras and photos, and all of those aspects are additional pieces of safety. And one of the most difficult statistics I saw was in the area of our teens and the uprise of sexting and just the difficultness of it and safety. But it was 4,900% uptick in pornography since kids have been out of school. Children, teens, looking for the content, reading the content, we as adults have to realize that it's out there. And we have to have these conversations. It's not comfortable, guys. As a parent, these are not easy conversations. But the last thing you want is for your child to be approached in a way and not have the vocabulary or the tools to defend themselves in a way, or stop, or be able to put a boundary in place. And if these aren't things that they're going to be approached to in your home, in college, in their early years, these are things that continue to come up. So we're not training our children right now for just this time. We're training our children for something that we're continuing to see a rise in online. We're continuing to see an uptick in cyberbullying, an uptick in online sexting, an uptick in these type of safety things. We have to continue to give our children tools. And if the children don't feel you're a place that you can even say the words, you're probably not a safe place for them to ask the question. Just like I find in bullying, if a parent says, wow, I went to the seminar and I never knew about this, and I was reading all this, I was shocked. Do you know anyone who's experienced this? And then the child's like, well, yeah. And they can start to share because the parents have opened a conversation that you're a safe person.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what I was thinking was, okay, so what are some specific sentences I can say to open up this conversation that open it up, but again, without introducing things that might not be appropriate.
Right? So even one great one would be at dinner. Wow, I listened to this live today, and it never occurred to me this was going on. Have you had any friends who may have experienced this? And then it's not a projection to your child, but it opens the door of, because you might say, they may say, yeah, I've had a friend that happened to. Could be your child, but it may be a friend. You might be surprised when you open an approach of, wow, I just felt so silly. I felt so naive. I had no idea. You know, sometimes when we take the hit as the parent of, wow, I learned something new today too. It helps our kids not feel like they're on the defensive or attacked. You know, just kind of a very casual conversation, right? Of, wow, it really made me realize how much I've never thought about that. And that's not a way that is introducing information, it's opening a conversation.
So I can imagine too, then, as a parent, you open that conversation and you're wanting to provide an environment of safety. You're wanting to provide an environment where your child feels free and safe to talk about it. But I can also imagine opening up that conversation, having my child say yes, and then me being like a deer in the headlights, like, okay, what do I say now? You know,
okay, Heather, this is important. I'm so glad you brought this up. Okay, everybody pay attention. This is very important. What Heather said is so important. You are probably going to want to freak out. Everything inside of you is going to go, oh, I can't believe they said that. Now what? Your children are reading your body language. Yes. They are looking to you to see if you're a safe place. Just everything inside can freak out, but you need to keep this calm. Okay? One of the best ways that I coach parents to reply is, wow, that must be hard. Could you tell me more?
Tell me more. Good line.
That's it. And then shush it. Because they're going to give you droplets. They're going to give you just little nuggets to see if you're really a safe person to share this with. And I will tell you from the homeschool community, a couple of things that have come up from even boys, teenage boys, who have said they have had people approach them online for photos and nudes and to perform things for money in our homeschool community from people they've met online in other groups. These are children who've been always homeschooled, always.
So I think that what we're introducing is a concept of parents now having the opportunity to have an inside look into what their children might be experiencing day to day, and they just haven't been able to see.
Right?
You're getting a window into what day-to-day school look like, what your peers look like, especially if you have technology ways that you're staying connected to your school. So
Yes.
The next thing you talk about when you talk about your 3 S's, you talk about safety, and we've talked about providing some resources there, but you also talk about the next thing is structure. So
Yes.
could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I'll touch basically on structure. You guys have done such a beautiful job of putting a lot together in structure. We kind of look at a rhythm of the day and the importance of when a family or a person is in crisis or is dealing with a lot of new information. Your brain doesn't want to have to think more than it needs to, right? So if we kind of rise about the same time, roughly, and we kind of do schoolwork roughly around the same time, and we have lunch around the same time, and there's kind of a rhythm of the day, it helps your brain not to have to think, right? That's very important. You're processing so many new things right now. They're processing understanding COVID-19. They're processing distant learning. They're processing, for many of our children, are processing losing their sports season and losing all their friends and their graduation even and their prom, all of these things, which are very stressful. The brain doesn't need more to overwhelm it. It's already overwhelmed. And so the more kind of structure of a day, the more rhythm, the more we can put in place that seems normal as much as possible. It just helps everything kind of calm down a little bit. If you try to throw in all new things at one time, it creates just more of a wellness. And that's why kind of having some kind of structure, it's like our bookends that hold it all together. If we can just hold them up here within the structure, the other parts we can make work. But they've got to have some flow.
Yeah, I've heard others talk about such a helpful way of looking at the routine or structure is more like a routine rather than a schedule. We had a guest last week who spoke about the difference between setting a rigid schedule versus just having a routine, a flow of the day.
That's all that's really important right now.
Yeah, and helping to provide that structure gives a sense of safety, and it helps you as a parent also kind of feel a sense of calm and peace in the day as it goes on. And let's face it, how we're feeling, whether we are getting the support we need, whether we're feeling safety in our own environment, is going to influence the whole tone of the home. Absolutely. So that's a really good important. And can you speak to that just a little bit? I mean, we're talking about kids, but I'm also thinking about myself as a parent. You know, if I'm finding out or that there are these risks for my child, or that there are these things going on in my child's life, let's just briefly talk about where I can find support so that I can be savvy, so that I can feel full enough to be able to offer those resources.
Well, one, I think what you guys are doing at Mom Possible and your groups online are important. You need to plug in. To the hearts of moms out there right now, I will tell you, we're all struggling. I do think as homeschool moms have had a bit of an advantage that we haven't had. We're definitely adjusting, but we did have a little bit of a heads up of having to take on the responsibility of our children's education, so we could adapt a little faster, but it's still hard. And moms, we're adjusting to our husbands many times being in the home with us now, our children, fearful and worried about the future, worried if they'll even go to college next year, will they even have a season? We're carrying a lot of burden for the family. And taking time for your own personal self-care is like the oxygen you need. It will not matter 5 years from now if that book or that packet or that online class happened, but your child will remember how you walked through this time with them. They are going to remember how you showed up every day. That's what's going to matter. And so how you choose to show up and be present, even when it's really hard. Are we putting the phone down and connecting eye to eye with our children? Are we taking a few extra minutes for the hugs, or an extra hug even for our teens that are struggling? Are we taking the time to have everyone turning everything off for one night a week, game night or something? Are we finding some new traditions within our home that we're all filled? And every family is differently. For our family, we've built a time capsule during this time that gives us time to talk. We're putting in things like, for me personally as a mom, I every single morning am journaling. I spend time with God and I journal and I write down just my heavy heart and where I am, and asking for help to come through this time, because I cannot do this, and the burdens that just feel heavy for families we're walking with. I take time to give myself permission when things are going wayward at 2 p.m. and we just cannot do anymore. We just hit pause, and that's okay, because there is literally nothing in any of these academic books that prepare you for a crisis of this magnitude.
Right.
And you just have to just show yourself grace, right, moms? You just have to show yourself grace. I do have a few moms who are getting together and doing meetups, like a group of 5 to 7 moms who are doing the Zoom meetups over a cup of coffee in the morning to pray together before they start their day, or at the end of the day with hot tea. Just a way to connect, like we're doing now, Heather. There's a lot to be said to just connect to another human outside of your home. We're built for relationships. Right? So do you have some friends that you can connect to during this time? And if you don't, it might be time to really ask God if there are women that can come alongside you during this time to help you. Because we're not meant to do this alone.
No, absolutely not. And I think it more than ever before, just the need for intentionality to reach via Zoom. I don't know why. It just feels harder than seeing and driving to get a cup of coffee. But I think that you're bringing up such an important point about how we need to be there with each other, so we can be there for our kids. We have a few viewers, Clay, Masuma, and Ross, have all talked about the importance of listening, talking, communicating with our kids. And we need to be filled up by communicating with each other as well, so we can be prepared for those things.
Women are specifically, we're really built to be relational.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. Well, so,
it's really important to have other women walk this beautiful journey with us. And we need to be able to process this and what's going on, and get wisdom and guidance. And there's always a mom we can help pull along, but there's always somebody who's a little bit ahead of us that can help us see balance when we're in the thick of it. And that's so important.
And let's also bring in those dads. We've got a lot of dads who are in the same space. And in fact, I don't, at least in my home, I know this isn't true everywhere, but in my home, my husband is more technologically savvy than I am. And so he's often going to be the one who's going to be really catching those challenges that my kids might be having, that might be coming through in technology ways. So dads are a very, very important part of having the conversation with your sons, especially about some of these other things too, right?
Right. And our men are really wired to be protectors and problems. They like to solve a problem, right? So they like to jump in there and solve the problem, and giving them of a conversation of, hey, I saw this today and it occurred to me, what we've had in software out there is probably 3 or 4 years old. Maybe we need to look at updating it, or maybe it's a time that we need to look at some new protections as a family. Is this something you think you could help with? It would be a great way. And then they can also share with their community of other men to really help their community of other men in their church and their small groups and their works, keep their families safe during this time. They can be problem solvers and leaders in so many ways. And I think that's beautiful, Heather. You're right.
Well, so let's move into support, because that is your third S.
It is.
No matter where your child is coming from, this is a time for all of us to be really learning about practical ways we can offer support for our kids and for each other, like we were just talking about. So what are some of the really practical tips you have there, Candace?
So when we start talking about support, I think first we need to start talking about sharing coping mechanisms, right? So support for coping mechanisms, guys, and these are for every family, it's going to look a little differently, but some basic coping mechanisms are one, helping your kids get in tune with their emotions. If they're angry, if they're frustrated, how can they identify the feeling in their body with a word to tell you so you can help? It's important, right? We need to learn within our own support. How do we ask for support? How do we ask for help? So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You said something that was kind of key there, and I want to make sure I understand. You said something about how you're feeling in your body as a tie-in to maybe how you can then communicate about a feeling. Is that what you were saying?
Yes,
Can you elaborate
yeah.
on that a little bit?
A lot of our children, it might be that anger is erupting, but they're really not feeling anger. Underlying is fear. So much anger comes out, like you might have a child that's outbursting or that's really frustrated, or this is what's showing. But when you unpack it and you get down to the emotion itself, it's really fear. I'm scared I'm going to lose you. I'm scared grandma and grandpa are going to die in COVID-19. I'm scared I'll never go back to school. So a lot of the underlying may be a fear, and our kids struggle. I think a lot of adults struggle too. Right? We struggle with putting the emotion that's happening in the body with the kind of what we're seeing on the surface.
Right.
And so it can really help kind of our kids tune in to what's going on. And there's a lot of great things on the internet that you can look at, feelings or feeling charts or going to erupt. We really want our kids to come to us before that they're a point out of a 1 of a 10, that they're like an 8 or a 10. If they start to feel a lot of frustration, a lot of anger building up, cabin fever going on, whatever that is, we kind of want them to make sure they're talking to us early on so we can talk to them about tips and tools. And those tips and tools will be different for each family, but for many, it could be, hey, when we're getting frustrated and angry, it's very possible with our preteens, they may just have a lot of extra hormones going on and they're used to being able to running and sports and different things. Maybe they need somebody to come alongside with them and do some intense workouts or go for a walk or bike or something. There could be more underlying there that's not just COVID, right? We deal with, there could be a lot there, but helping our kids know when to ask for those support that they need. We have to give them permission to ask for that.
And I like that point, and it makes me think back a week or so ago, we had Cheryl and Derek Carter on, and they had a great plan for their family. They talked about, before any of these difficult emotions showed up, they had a meeting where they talked about what they anticipated to be difficult things in their family and a plan for that. So it's almost like planning ahead for conflict.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
Yes.
There's going to be conflict in your family right now. If there isn't, I don't know any family who isn't having some kind of a struggle or conversations or different emotions or personality conflicts right now. Absolutely. Talking about those ahead of time so that we can put some things in place. When this happens, here's a few tools we can try, right? Because we're trying to teach our children long-term coping mechanisms. So when they're 20 and they're out of your home and these things are arising, that they're turning to the right issues for ways to handle them, not for the wrong things, right? We all have to learn these things. Just like the sort of when you're trying to make sure that people don't head down the path of substance abuse or other mental health or different things, you want to give them coping mechanisms to deal with it. And so we're just teaching our kids really early on, how do we teach you the right coping mechanisms? For some, it might be things like journaling. I mean, it could be. We have children that write books about their trauma or past. Right now in our family, we have some building furniture as a way that they are just needing to. What I found at the end of it was I need to do something, but that sense of something, Heather, was I need to feel accomplished. They there was just not this feeling of everything was the same thing. So taking on things like learning to build furniture was a new task that I learned, which is why we put in there taking an online class or learning something virtually under support. Your kids might just need a sense of personal accomplishment, or that I'm not just sitting here doing the same thing over and over. So for kids, for my oldest, who's used to being in sports and competing at a high level right now, and who trains and is in kind of a mindset of that sense of accomplishment, we work towards a goal. Having a goal that he had something he could concrete look at the end was a big deal. And then
that's so insightful of you as a parent to identify what that feeling of sadness, where it was coming from, what that sense of loss was tied to. And I think that is one, Candace, I mean, one of the opportunities in this challenging moment is we're with our kids more perhaps than we have been before. So you're able to start seeing those things and getting to know your child. But Rachel mentions, one of our viewers, that she's finding that sadness seems to be at the root of a lot of her kids' feelings.
Yes.
And so, I think
is a lot of sadness.
What are some encouraging tips you could give to a parent really trying to help meet their child in those sad places?
Well, one, I think it's important. It's Rachel. Is that who you said it was, Rachel?
Yeah.
I think it's important that you realize, and kudos to you for acknowledging, and your children to acknowledge, I'm sad. I'm sad, and I'm sad. We're missing so many things as a family. Acknowledging that sadness together. And I can also share with you, we did a COVID kind of workbook and journal for children to help write their feelings during COVID-19 that our group produced as a way to help families writing letters, doing interviews, talking daily about how I'm feeling, what it's like not having these things, and as a place to kind of compile them so they can see them. It even has emotion charts and different things, and it's a downloadable journal, so we can share that with you. It's actually really
awesome.
It's called, journaling. It's our quarantined edition for COVID-19, and it's kind of our trauma writing piece, and it's really beautifully done because we use them then and have our kids putting them into our time capsules, and they're things that they keep for later to share with their children. But acknowledge that you're sad. This is really sad. But also in our Bully Broken stuff, when we have kids that are dealing with sad or dealing with other emotions, a few tools that we use are, number one, a playlist. And I do think playlist and music is a way to help. We help children that are dealing with anxiety and depression and sadness in a place of low. If you're a family of God, right, putting great worship and praise music in that, or from wherever your child's perspective is, what touches their heart and lifts them to a place. Music therapy can be a beautiful way. And you don't have to be a therapist. You can just pop online and create your Spotify list. And in an instant of being really sad, I mean, Heather, I'm sure you felt that. You can put on a song and instantly, very quickly, your brain can start going to places of happiness, of joy, of memories, of looking forward to things. It's a great way. So that's a really quick tool that we like to work with things on. I'm also a big fan. I mean, even with my teens, I'm a big fan of art. I just think being able to express it out now, for some of my kiddos, it's an old door and spray paint, and I have to just, that is their art, but their way of expressing it, to just get it out, you can see things in it that you may not know. Our family, we've actually sat down with all of our canvases and everybody's written things. We all have the same idea, like how I'm feeling during this time. You'd be shocked what comes out of those. My youngest has been sad he's missing things, but he is loving quarantine because he feels so much more connected with his family not being busy. The only thing wrong with quarantine is we still have electricity. And if we couldn't get on a computer or online, then families would totally have to talk to each other. And I'm like, but even with the sadness, we trying to do that. And I also think there's a way in sadness, to start to look for some of the gratitudes and some of the blessings in the moment. Even when things are really hard, we can kind of train our brain. We use gratitude jars in our house, little notepads. You can write something. You know, my kids start getting grumpy too much. It's like, okay, you need to stop and find 5 things you're grateful for and
Right.
fill the jar with grateful, because we can become in a pattern that we focus so much on one area, we stop looking for the beauty and God's blessings. That could be as simple as we as a family can go for a walk. And that might be the only thing today I can find that's a blessing, but I found one. And so
Well,
acknowledging that.
so sorry to interrupt.
No,
Um,
it's your
so,
show.
yeah, no, it's just, I'm not trying to interrupt you. There's this delay. Forgive me, but this is life, right? This is the virtual life of interviews this way. So Rochelle Somerville is one of our awesome educational
She's
consultants.
fantastic.
Awesome, I know. And she was mentioning how much she loves the idea of journals, because children, especially younger children, don't always have words to know what to say, but a picture can go a long way in terms of communicating and helping parents know where to start a conversation. And I was even thinking, you know, sometimes when I ask my kids to do art or ask them to draw something, they don't know what to draw. But if I pull open a picture book or I bring up art, then we can maybe even use beautiful art that's already been created by someone else to bring out feelings. What feelings do you feel when you look at this art?
I was finding these, Heather, if you've been in any of my classes, we use
Yes.
these for our little kids. And we talk about their feelings. Like when we're doing our bullying class or sad classes, if he's sad, he puts his head down and his body's down and he's sad. And then how the other guys were attacking him. We use these bendable animals when we're talking with littles that don't have the words sometimes to draw them out. And then they get to put names to them. We have kind of 4, because we find there's normally, it's about enough. The 4 little characters, and kind of who gets to be the hero of the story. We normally pick our lion, and just what they're seeing from these other people. I will tell you, even within families, siblings can be cruel to other kids in the house, and then being able to show you how they're feeling in the house. For littles, if you have stuffed animals, if you have little old beanie babies or things like that, kind of like how, you know, just playing as you're talking about drawing or Play-Doh or different things. We just kind of like these because they look like they're a person without, you know, they're just a little character that they can use and show emotion, and you can get a really good feel into how they're feeling about the other people in the house or not being heard. Sometimes one will be very far away from all the other 3 because he just doesn't feel included. The little guy in the family might feel like mom and dad and older siblings are all online and taking classes and talking to friends, and I'm just by myself. I'm really sad because I don't really feel as engaged as the rest of the family. I don't feel connected. And then we can talk about ways we can meet that child's needs. But we have to know what's going on in their heart to know what's going on. And so, Heather, as you talked about writing, journaling, playing, just playing can be beautiful.
Well, and I think that you're bringing up so many great ways to start conversations, to bring out words for the emotions people are feeling. I mean, even us as parents, Ramona, one of our viewers, says they were already homeschooling. They lost their home, and now they have the lockdown right behind it. So they're struggling with everything about this, and the quarantine makes it even more abnormal. And I think one of the things that I'd like to ask you is that once we do draw out those feelings, again, because of where parents are, or maybe because of your own background and knowing how to communicate with your kids, we might not know what to say. So what kind of resources would you point us to? How can we then engage further conversation and offer the kind of support our kids might need?
Well, I think it would depend. In her case, that is really a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of transition, a lot of change, a lot of unknowing. And I will say right now, I think there are some wonderful counselors out there that if you need some help are offering pro bono work. So make sure you reach out. I know we posted some over on our group the other day that for families, there are a few out there. So I'll share that as well, Heather. For families that are looking for more ways to communicate, we offer in our workbooks We have them. They're, I believe they're up and able to be kindled now. But we talk to families about all of these ways to communicate more, and we get down to everything you just talked about, from finding passion lists to all the words. I was actually sitting here, every emotion, right? We even list out every type of emotion and help our kids have feelings, older and younger. Sometimes the best way to figure it out is just to start hopping on some lives. We try to do a lot at Bullied Broken, and finding ways to communicate, because every child is not going to be receptive. Every conversation, just like we talk about love languages, we share lots of ideas, because some kids are going to look at these and want to know where the data is. I don't care how little they are. They're just not those type of kids, right? They want to see the facts. And others are going to need more feelings. And so we're sharing ideas and we're sharing tips and ways for communication. I would look to resources. We specifically help families with healing forward in trauma, whether it's from bullying or anxiety or different things, and we'd love to help your community there. You can join us. We have a free Facebook group, and over at our website, we'd love to help you there. I definitely think there's some great organizations, which I just don't have it at access at my fingers, Heather, but that are offering very low counseling, Christian counseling even, rates at very, very low prices and free right now for families that need that extra support. I think that's important. And touching into communities, even spending time to hop on to when you're listening to experts and different ideas, you might just find one nugget out of that conversation that really resonated with you and your family, but it might be the one thing that makes a drastic change. I know I can go and listen to hours of professional development, but if I can come away with one thing can implement, it can sometimes be just that one change that makes a difference. We also, sometimes I don't know what I have in front of me. We use black lights for our kids. If you guys have ever worked with those, they're super cool. They have a little black light on them. The words write on blank. And so some of our kids, if you're looking for other tips and tools to get your kids communicating, a lot of times they struggle to be able to tell you what's going on with them. So we have them write it out, and you can get these on Amazon. We also have them in our kits. But even if it says...
So this is invisible ink, essentially?
It is invisible ink, yeah.
Okay.
So you don't see anything, right? You see nothing?
No.
We shine the light on it, and it just could say, I'm sad. I know it's backwards, guys. But kids can write in these, like an invisible ink, and shine the light on it. And I have kids that actually journal everything in invisible ink, because they're not able to even begin to see the pain inside. But we want them to start being able to express it in some way.
Right.
And it's
so that gives them another layer of feeling safe. Like they're writing it down, but it isn't something they're really visibly having to confront, but it is something that you can begin to share with them and encourage more of that conversation. Yeah. So we've talked today about a lot of things. We've talked about safety. We've talked about ways that parents can just be aware that there's a lot going on maybe that we weren't aware of before. I think one of the tips you mentioned earlier, Candace, before we talked, and I want to make sure that we bring out just real briefly here before we close, is that need for oversight for parents who are having their kids connected to other classes, to classes via Zoom, classes online, so that they can be aware of who their peers are, what kind of interactions are going on.
It's a beautiful time right now, guys. If you're here, we're in Northern Virginia, and I can tell you so many counties have actually tried to go to distant learning or online learning, and then a very short period of time had to shut it down, because parents are now being able to see what's going on in the classroom. They're seeing the type of behavior that's happening. They're getting a real window, a bird's eye view right into their children's classrooms. And there's a lot of accountability going there. So I'd make sure if your kids are online, it doesn't matter to me if they're in a county school or a private school, a charter school, or an online out school class, anywhere. Make sure you're involved. If your children are in line and communicating with other adults and children, you need to make sure that you are ultimately the oversight and that it's an appropriate place. Because even within every family, people are going to have different expectations as to what's acceptable. And when you start watching, you might be really surprised. I've had many families call me that could not believe what they were seeing happening in their kids' classrooms. It just baffled them. And so we do one-to-one kind of public school to homeschool consulting, and we kind of just get them a plan, like from now through September, what's the plan? And Heather, I'm sure you guys are talking to everybody now too. Unfortunately, it's probably time to think about, what are you going to do next year? Let's say schools open back up in September and October and have to close back in again. It's a very it's a possibility. So making sure you're really, as a family unit, talking about what that's going to look like. And if it's not working now, you might really want to make sure you guys have a solid plan for even the 2020 to 2021 school year. It's just heartening. It's just heartening.
Yeah, that's hard for a lot of people to prepare. Yeah, it's such an excellent point. That's very hard for a lot of people to hear, because you're just trying to make it through the day-to-day now, right? And that feels like more than enough.
It feels like way more than enough.
But it is also almost like a fire drill, in that you're getting to sort of experience on a smaller scale what you might need to be preparing for a longer period of time, and you're getting some trial and error experience. But I like what you're saying about the oversight, the opportunity for oversight, because who can go?
You've never had that, guys?
No.
Parents, you haven't been able to sit in the classroom and see what's being taught or what's going on. And all of my parents out there who are frustrated that the packets are coming home and it's just review, that's what they were doing anyway. They're getting ready for testing. It's what we do. So give your teachers some grace. They're doing their best, but you're really getting, and you're now having an opportunity, a beautiful opportunity to see what's going on. And God has slowed us, many of us, down enough that we can have the time to see inside how that works.
Well, so we have to wrap things up, but we have talked about safety, structure, and support. And you, Candace, are going to provide a lot of resources for people to follow up and be able to have some practical tools at home. Again, Candace is with Bullied, Broken, and Redeemed. So many wonderful and helpful resources. Candace, you're in such a unique space. And we thank you for everybody that's been a part of this Facebook Live today. And we'll continue with next week. We're going to have another Monday where we talk about ways to support the emotional side of this whole experience. So thanks, Candace. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.